Thank you everyone for joining our webinar today on building a service portal widget from scratch. We are very excited to be doing this webinar today because we've had a lot of people talk to us just in our day-to-day at K17, just customers that we're talking to, and that's actually as witnessed by the large turnout that we have here for this webinar as well. People really want to know more about how to use Service Portal, how to make it effective, and how to take it to the next level. This is going to be somewhat of a technical review of how to do this, but if you are relatively new to coding and scripting, this is really designed for you. This is really a beginner's guide for how to get into this. So if you really don't have much of a background in doing this, but you're interested in trying to roll up your sleeves, you're absolutely in the right place, and we can try to show you a little bit more about how to get the most out of your service portal and really how to take it out of the box. So right now I'm just going to kind of let people know you can ask us questions throughout the webinar. We will be answering them at the end, so if you don't get an answer right away, just sit tight. We'll be definitely going through all of the questions towards the end. There are also some handouts that I want to point out to everybody. And Jeff will be going into the details on these a little bit, but one that I wanted to point out right away is the very top file is webinar, building a service portal widget in ServiceNow from scratch. That is the slide deck for this presentation that you guys have available to you now. One question that we always get right at the top is, will this be recorded and sent out to attendees? Absolutely. We are recording this currently. We will be making this available on our website as well as sent to you by email a couple days after the presentation. If you are not familiar with Cerna Solutions, we are a company that specializes in ServiceNow consulting, primarily in implementations, integrations, and unique product offerings. We do focus in service portal consulting, test management services and solutions, as well as remote administrative services, such as our virtual admin program. I'd like to talk a little bit about upfront our service portal expertise before we get started with the actual presentation. We do have over 7 years of experience building custom employee portals, and that's just Jeff alone, who's going to be doing the presentation for us today. We actually have a full team of people who made it their passion to be working with portals and working on the employee experience in CMS back when they had to do it in Jelly code, if that's any, or JavaScript, if that's any indicator of their levels of passion for you. We do offer expert solutions, including single or multiple service desks, incident deflection with knowledge base, which will help you to actually see the financial benefit of a service portal optimization, optimized mobile portals, asset-based self-service, and really our focus and our mission statement with our service portal practice is to focus on transforming the service management for all users, not just the end users, but for the fulfillers as well, to make it a full team effort and see a benefit on each side. One thing that we offer, if you guys want to talk to us and have any questions for us about what we do with Service Portal, we do offer a free Service Portal workshop that will help you walk through what is necessary to get from the beginning to end of where you want to see your company and what's really best for you guys in terms of getting a Service Portal off the ground that's the most effective that it possibly can be. Right now, I'm going to throw it over to Jeff Pierce. Jeff Pierce is our portal practice manager. As I mentioned before, he alone has over 7 years of experience in portal and platform experience. He is a master UX designer, and he's not too bad at the ukulele and scuba as well, as you can see there. So if you ever notice the island theme in any of our content, that most likely came from Jeff. How's it going, Jeff?
I'm doing very well. Thanks, Tim. Okay. So yeah, today's agenda, what are we going to do? First, let's talk about the widget concept that we're going to build, and then I'll go over what you're going to learn as we build this widget. We'll get into the widget code. We'll actually build this thing. Then we'll talk about all the cool things we built and some helpful resources for you, and we'll have some Q&A. So let's get right into it. So in this webinar, what you will expect to learn is a lot. Like Tim said, we're going to really jump in and get our hands dirty with the code. So we're going to use a modal to open up an embedded widget. We're going to use a bootstrap component template We're going to hack the buttons on the modal dialog using Angular Element. We'll use glide record to populate your template with server data. We will use an image field in your HTML template. We'll call client-side functions from your HTML template, conditionally style some HTML elements, and insert and update records from your widget. So it sounds like a lot, but hang in there and you'll see this all come together. So what are we building? I was asking a colleague of mine what widget should we build for this webinar, and they said, well, how about something that increases portal adoption? And I said, pet adoption? That's a great idea. Let's do it. So we're going to build a pet adoption widget. Now, if you're thinking this is really absurd, how is this going to be at all applicable to my business? Don't worry. This is just a fun way of demonstrating all the cool things you can do with the widget. But in the real world, you could just replace this content with anything. Service catalog content, knowledge base articles, tasks. So just keep that in mind that, you know, as we build this thing, now certainly would be cool if you actually implemented pet adoption into your portal. But just remember, this is, you know, rather than pets, this could be anything. The functionality that we're demonstrating is what's important. So the widget that we're actually going to build, it's going to put a button on your portal page that allows the user to click it when they need emotional support, and it's going to open up a modal window where they can browse through available pets to select, they can read their bios, and they can pick one to adopt. And after adopting one, they will now have a portal pet living in a little doghouse on their home page. So that's just a little overview of what we're actually going to build. So as we go through all of this, it will be easier to follow along and you'll kind of get the whole concept. So to get started, I have three things that I've already prepared. That's 2 tables and a pet house image. So my first table is called u_pets. That's my database of pets. So like I said before, this, you know, when you go actually translating to this something for a real business case, this could be anything. This could be your knowledge articles, catalog items, whatever. But for this example, my table is very simple. For each pet, I just have a name, which is a string field. I have a photo, which is an image field, and then a bio, another string, and then a number. Then I have a pet adoptions table. So that's the table that's going to track who has adopted which pet. And that's a very simple table also. It has 2 reference fields, one to the user table and one to the pet table. Then of course I have my pethouse.png. That's just an image that I uploaded to the image table, just like you would store any other image in your instance. So we have a very basic architecture, and I'm just going to show you those really quickly. So here's my pets table. You can see I have uploaded GIFs for each image, so that makes it kind of fun, and I've maintained a name and a bio for each one of these guys. So these pets are all ready to adopt. And in our reference table, pet adoptions, I have this ready to go. There are no entries in here yet because nobody's adopted any pets, but we'll see this populate once we get into it. All right, so without any further ado, let's get widgetal. Let's jump in, and we're going to start building these. Now we're going to kind of hop back and forth between 2 widgets actually. One is the My Pet widget that we're building, and 2 is the pet selection widget. But together, these 2 widgets are going to behave as one experience, and you'll see how all that happens. So let's just jump right in. So to start, of course, you're going to want to activate the Service Portal plugin. So this is what you get when you turn it on and you go to the out-of-box portal. I haven't changed anything here. This is just the standard home page. And so this is all I need to get started. And so I'm going to go right in to the widgets module. So you can type in widget in the left-hand filter, and under Service Portal, you'll find widgets. That's not to be confused with the System UI widgets. That's a totally different table. So I'm going to open up widgets, and I'm going to create a new one. Actually, I'm going to create both of these just as blank templates to start so that I've got them. My first one I'm going to call My Pet. I'll save it. And then the next one, I'm going to call it Pet Selection. And I'm just going to do an insert on that one. It's to create a new one. All right, so now I have 2 blank widgets ready to go. And I'm going to close down these other windows that I don't need right now, just so that I can focus on these. So I'm going to open up My Pet. And I'm not going to use this form view to edit this. I'm going to scroll down and find the Open in Widget Editor link. And what that does is it opens it up in a view that makes much more sense. I can see my HTML template, CSS, client script, and server script all on one page here. It's pretty nice. Now I'm going to duplicate this tab. And I'm going to open up my other widget using the widget selector. So that other one was called Pet Selection. So now I have both of these that I can hop back and forth between pretty easily. We'll just wait for this one to load. Sometimes this view takes a little bit. All right, we're ready to go. All right, so the first thing that I want to do is, when the page loads, I want to know, has the user even adopted a pet before? So I'm going to check that pet adoptions table to see if there are any entries. So I'm going to close down some of these tabs here that I'm not using right now. All right, now all the code that I paste in here is available in the My Pet PDF and Pet Selection PDF. So those are really just text files, and they're organized by HTML, CSS, client script, and server script. So everything that I do here is in there. So you'll be able to, you don't have to follow along trying to type in this stuff as we go, so or take screenshots, so don't worry about that. All right, so here in my server script, what I'm doing with this widget is I'm just doing a check as the page loads, a glide record on the UPET adoptions table to see if there are any entries for the current user. If there is an entry, then I'm going to populate this object, data.currentPet. Now, what is data? Data is an object that is already made available to you for every single widget. It's local to this widget. So whatever I put in the data object, I can use in my HTML template and my client script. So current pet, this is just a namespace that I created. It's going to be a new array of, or a new object within the data object. And so I'm going to go and get information about that pet. So now keep in mind, this is only if I actually have a current pet adoption here. If I don't have one, well then this data.currentPet, that's going to be undefined. So that's very important to know as we start to build the template for this. So the first time a user logs in, they're not going to have a pet, so data.currentPet will be undefined. So let's leave that for a second, and let's start building our template. So what's the first thing the user is going to need? The user is going to need a button to open up the pet selection modal. So here's the template that I'm starting for the button. So I put a button element inside a div, and you'll see on this div, I use this ng-if. That's an out-of-box Angular directive that allows me to toggle the inclusion of everything inside of this HTML based upon this expression. So what I'm saying here is if there is no current pet, then go ahead and show this. And notice I'm using data. Like I said, whatever I put in the data object is going to be usable in my HTML template and client script. So here I've defined this. Well, actually, in our case right now, I have not defined it because there is no no pet adoption. So this is going to evaluate to true. So what that does is it's going to put a button on the page. And I'll get to this ng-click part in a moment, but a quick note about the notation for including just labels. You know, this looks like maybe JavaScript notation. Really all this is anything I put inside the $ curly brackets is going to be considered a message. So what the portal is going to, Service Portal does is it goes and looks in the messages table to see if any messages have been maintained for this key. Because you may have translations for this. You may be supporting multiple languages. If there is a translation found, then it's going to use that translation here. If not, then it's just going to print to the page whatever you have inside here. So that's why I included it in here. I don't have any translations, so it's just going to print this label. All right, so I've included an ng-click function. ng-click, that's another Angular function, or directive, rather, that allows me to very easily call a function or you know, do many other things when I click on this element. So what I've done, I have the c.onBrowsePets, and then I'm passing that function lg. So what is that? Well, we haven't built that function yet, so let's go ahead and do that right now. And that's going to be in the client script. So let's open up the client script tab. And I'm going to paste this function that I built. All right, I'm going to close down this server script just so that we can see this a little better. All right, so our client script, this is where we can write client-side code. So, you know, this is usually what's going to interact with the template or with the user actions. So a couple things in here that we want to point out. This line, line 3, this is very standard in widgets. You'll see this in a lot of the out-of-box widgets. Var c equals this. This is just creating some namespace for the objects and functions that pertain to this particular widget. So I'm going to be able to use C then to reference functions between the HTML template and this client script. So this is very, very standard. The next one, var shared equals empty array. This is just creating a namespace because we're going to want to be able to share data between this widget and the other widget that we're going to build. So don't worry about getting your heads wrapped around this too much at this point. That will be more apparent momentarily. All right, so here's the function that we're actually calling from our HTML template. If we remember over here, ng-click equals c onBrowsePets. So what that does is when I click that button, it's going to call this function, and I'm passing to it a size. What is that size, LG? That's just referring to the size of the modal that I want to open, because when I click that button, I want to open up a modal window. Now, what are modal windows? That's an out-of-box service that you can make use of in Service Portal, and it's just based upon the standard Bootstrap UI modal component. So it's a really easy way to open up a modal dialog. And you can see that I've included SP modal up here in my main function. This is important because if you do want to use the modal service, you have to inject it into your widget. So that's what I'm doing here. I'm making that modal service available. Like I said, this is an out-of-box thing that we can use. And so then there's these bindings that we can do. So open, spmodal.open. So this is going to open that window, and here I'm defining the properties of that window. So I'm defining the size, I'm giving it a title. Now widget, this is the widget that I want to embed in that modal. So I'm going to go ahead and grab the sysid of that other widget right now. So my pet selection widget, that's the one I want to get. Copy sysid back in here, and I'm going to paste that right there. Okay. All right. buttons. So my modal needs to have a button so that I can interact with that modal. So I'm just calling that button adopt. And then I'm adding a shared property to this modal window. So remember I defined shared as an empty array up here. We're setting this up so that we can share information between the widget that is embedded and this widget right here. And we'll get to this stuff in a moment here. Don't worry about the then function. All right, so I'm going to save what I have so far. And you can tell all right, so now that's saved. Actually, let's open up our server script and our HTML template again so we can see this all together. And I'm going to do one more thing. I'm going to enable the preview of this widget. All right, so here's the preview. So what do I have right now? I have a button on the page, and this button is there because I don't have a current pet. And when I click it, I get the modal window. And there's the modal window that I've defined. It's a large one. There's the title I gave it. There's the button that I defined. And when I click that button, it closes it. All right. So important thing to note is when I click this button, that's when this then function comes into play. So I click adopt, and here, let's close the server script down. And we'll see what happens when I click adopt. Well, I am defining a selected pet value. So I want to know, obviously I've chosen a pet to adopt here in this window. So I want to, and that's going to happen in the widget that we embed with the actual pet selection widget. So that's where the sharing comes into play. I want to know what pet was selected. So I'm assigning that value here to this more local object in this widget, c_data.selectedPet. And then I use c.server.update. This is going to let my server script know that that data object has been updated. And so then I'm going to be able to take action on that in my server. So before we go any farther, let's go ahead and build our pet list so that we actually have some pets to select here. So for that, let's go over to the pet selection widget here. Remember, this one's blank. We haven't done anything with it yet. And let's do what we need to do to, first of all, populate an object with our available pets. All right. So not anything really too fancy going on right here. This is just a standard glide record that we're doing on the UPets table. I'm querying them all. And for each pet that gets returned, I'm going to add that pet to a new object called pets. So remember, data, that's available to everything in this widget. Now this data is different than this data over here. The data that, actually let me open that server script, than this data. Because remember, the data object is local to each widget. So whatever I put in this data is different than this one. That's why I've set up this sharing property here between the widgets, because I want to eventually be able to pass data between those two data objects. All right, so pet selection. So we're building an object, right? This pets object. So for each pet, I'm creating a new entry in data.pets, and I'm just grabbing these values from that glide record. I'm getting the name, the photo, the bio, and the sysID. So now you might notice I have toString at the end of each of these. That's important because when you build this object, it might try adding this value as another object or array, which will kind of really mess things up when you try making use of your pets object. So that's why we stringify each one of these values to make sure that we get a nice flat object built here. So that's really important to remember when you're doing this. Do toString on all your values. All right. So now that we've built our object of pets, let's build a template that will display those pets. All right. So here is our template that I've built. Now, I didn't have to design this template. You know, I found a Bootstrap component that worked pretty well for what I wanted, and let me show you how that works here. So I'm just gonna go to the Bootstrap components website. So everything you see right here on this page is going to be available to you to use in the Service Portal, because Service Portal is built on Bootstrap. It already has all the style sheets and JavaScript files. You know, has the whole library loaded. So anything you see in the components website is available to use, and it's deceptively simple. So let me go down to the thing that I'm using. So I'm using this custom content thumbnail template here. So it gives you the template for it right here. So all I did is I just copied this code and I pasted it into my widget, but then I added a few things. All right, I added some column responsiveness so that it lays out the way that I want it to. I've added a couple of class names in here because I do have some custom CSS that I've applied. Then I added in my Angular elements. So what I've done here is I've used ng-repeat, which is another Angular directive, to repeat this HTML for each pet in my data.pets object. So there's data.pets. Remember, whatever I define over here in my server script, I can use in my HTML template. So I'm iterating through data.pets, and for each item, I'm calling it pet. So for each one in here, I can now use the pet namespace to get to the values that I want. So I'm going to come back to this line in a second, the class. But you can see that the template that I build out, I've got the pet's image. Now these double curly brackets, this is how I inject a variable into my template. So if I wanted to display the pet photo, then I just use the curly brackets and do pet.photo. The pet's name, pet.name, inside of curly brackets. Pretty simple. Okay, let's see what we have so far. I'm going to save this and enable the preview. All right, there's our pets. So you can see that it printed out one of those thumbnail panels for every one of our pets in our table. So we have our button. There's the button that's defined, the name, the bio, and of course the image. Now I don't have a pet selected yet, so so this right here, this ng class, isn't going to apply. But what this will do is ng class, of course you're seeing a pattern here, right? Anytime you see ng dash, that's an Angular directive. Don't ask me what ng stands for. I don't know. But so what I can do with this is I can say give this div a class of selected if this expression is true. So here's where that shared object comes in again. So what I want to know is if I have a current pet, then I want this div to be have the class of selected. So I'm checking to see, is the current pet name equal to this pet name, true or false? So c.widget.options.shared. That's how I'm accessing the the shared values from this other widget. So remember, here's the My Pet widget, and I've identified this. Shared.currentPet equals c.dataCurrentPet. So what this is doing, remember over here, I tried to define that. If I have a pet, that's going to be defined here as current pet. So I'm taking that current pet and I'm putting it into the shared object. So that's why over here in our pet selection, I have access to that now. So that's how I get these widgets to talk to each other. All right, so you notice I have a function here in the button, just like in our previous button where we opened up the modal. This one calls a function. Now I haven't built that function yet. Let's go ahead and build it right now by opening up the client script. And let's get this in here. All right. Let's close down our preview just so we're not distracted by Delilah. All right, what are we doing in this client script? Well, you can see we're getting access to that shared object here. That's how this is an essential part of sharing those objects between the two widgets. And you saw this one from the last one. Remember, that's very standard in all these widgets. Now I've injected the timeout service, and I'll tell you why in a moment. So here's our function, c.selectPet. That's the function that I'm calling in our template here. So when I click this button, I'm going to call this function, and I'm passing to it the current pet. So the pet that I've clicked on. So what do I do with that? So I have an object called selectedPet that I'm storing in the shared object. And I'm setting that equal to the pet that I passed to this function. So whichever pet that I selected, I've put it here in the shared object. Now that's going to be available to my other widget. So the other widget is going to know what pet was selected. Okay, so let's save this right now. And I'm going to demonstrate something. All right, so remember when we defined this modal. Oh, I'm sorry, let me just take this out of here really quick. When we defined this modal, we defined a button. And that button, well, geez, it's not there either. Oh, we're not seeing it because it's in the other one, adopt. So, oh, actually, this is a good point to demonstrate this. So now that we have built this widget and we have our pet selection, let's refresh the view of this. So now when I click the button, it's going to open up that modal, but now that modal displays my pet selection widget. That's because I embedded it here. Remember that? So now I have this list of pets that I can choose from, and at the bottom I have this adopt button. Now, just a quick note about this SP modal service. If I were just using the regular Bootstrap UI, I would have full access to all the bindings of that service, and I could, I could close all the functions that I wanted. So what that means is if I choose adopt a pet, oops, here, let me take this out here real quick, our fancy stuff, so I can demonstrate this. And I'm gonna, let's re-preview here. So without doing anything too custom, what I would have to do is first I would have to select a pet so that I would I could populate this data.selectedPet object, and then I would have to click adopt to actually close the window. But that's not a very good user experience. We don't want to have to make people click twice because it just isn't intuitive, and it's 2 clicks. Doesn't make sense. So what I did is because I didn't have access to call the close binding with the SP modal service, I've had to do a couple of special things. And that's where Angular element comes in. So those are these pieces here. Close these down. So when I click the adopt button, this function runs. And so what I want to do is first I want to make a selected pet assignment. Once that's done, I use the timeout function to wrap another action. So this is just ensuring that whatever I put inside of this happens after this happens, so that I don't get any errors. So I'm using Angular element. This is This is essentially what jQuery would do for you. So instead of using jQuery notation, we have Angular element now, which is a lot easier to use and maybe even more powerful. So what I'm doing here is I'm targeting that adopt button at the bottom of the page that we see over here. So this button right here, I can target that by its attribute. Because if I dig in behind the scenes, I see that that button has this ngClick attribute, and it calls the button click function. Well, I can't really call that function on my own just by clicking on one of these. So that's why I'm using this to click on it manually in the background. So when I click one of these, it's also clicking the adopt button at the bottom. So really, we still have two clicks that are happening, but for the user, it's just one. So that's what this is doing. Now, because that's happening, I no longer need to show that button at the bottom. So that's why I'm using Angular.element, and I'm targeting that same button, and I'm just applying a visibility property to it in CSS of hidden. So now, if I save this, and let's reload this widget over here. So now you see I no longer have that adopt button at the bottom. And then when I click this button, it simulates clicking the adopt button. So now we've built this widget so that we've actually been able to browse the pets that are available and select one. And when we select one, we're populating this c.data selected pet. So we haven't actually written this to our pet adoption table yet. So let's do that now. So that's where this server.update comes in. So this function runs after clicking the adopt button. We assign the selected pet to c.data.selectedPet, and then we call this, which lets the server script know, all right, the data object has been changed, and you can do stuff with it now. So let's add a little more to our server script. Okay, let's close this stuff down so we can see this better. All right, so I've added this portion to my server script now. So what I've said is, if we have an input, which means do we have updated data, and so that selected pet that I defined here, this c.data.selectedPet, this is now made available to the server script in the input object. So this is the changed data. So I can check this to see what my selected pet was. And I'm just checking to see that if the selected pet is not the current pet. Because if I selected the same pet I already have, I don't want to take any action on it. There's nothing to do. But if it's not, then we're going to make a second check. Is there a current pet? If so, then we're going to just update this glide record that we started up here with the name of the current pet. Because remember, we already have this glide record active. And if we found a current pet via userPet.next, then we can just update that glide record object right here with the new pet ID, and then we update it. And and then we reset the current pet object to whatever that selected pet was. But if there was no current pet, then we have to create a new entry in the table. So that's where I have the new pet glide record. So it's a new glide record on the UPet adoptions table. Initialize that record. I set the user to the current user's ID, and I set the pet to the ID of the selected pet. And I insert it, and then again, I just set data.current.pet to input.selectedPet. And so what that means is we'll have an adoption record. So let's save this. All right, so now if we look at our preview, I don't have a pet selected. So let's open up that selection, and let's choose a pet to adopt. Let's go with Cheech and Chomp. I like these guys. Okay, now you notice my button disappeared. And why was that? That's because we said that the visibility of that button is conditional, or the inclusion of this this whole HTML is conditional that data.currentPet is not defined or false. So that button is not displaying. So that means we have a current pet in the database. We found one here, or at least data.currentPet is not empty anymore. So let's build our template to actually house our pet. The moment has arrived. We're going to bring this little guy home. So we're going to add to our template. Here's our house for the pet to live in. So what are we doing here? This is just some HTML I wrote to build a little dog house. And to go along with this, I have some CSS. Let me put that in here. I'm not going to go into the CSS today just because we could spend all day talking about all of these properties and stuff. And that's not really the purpose of this webinar, to talk about CSS. So I'm not going to address the CSS. I'm just going to paste that in here. But this is available to you in the handout files if you are going to recreate this widget. All right, but some important things in here. So the opposite of what we're doing with the button up here, we're saying this stuff now will be available if there is a current pet defined. All right, so in there we just got some so this is our pet house picture. This is going to be the picture of our pet. So you can see I'm just using an inline style to give a background image to this div. And what am I using? I'm using those double curly brackets so that I can include a value that was defined in our script in the data object. And so I'm using data.currentPet.photo to display that image. And then I'm including the pet's name. And then I'm also including a little button to go along with the pet house that will reopen the modal. So this is calling the same function that we had that we're already using. Because if I'm tired of my pet or it's destroying my house, maybe I want a new one. I want to reopen that pet selection. Okay, so let's save this. Now what I expect to see, there it is. So now, because this widget loaded, and what did it do? First thing it did is went to check if there's an adoption stored, and there was. So it populated the current pet object, and so this HTML displayed instead of this one. And now I have my cute little pet over here, and there's the name. That's this right there, and of course the photo is that right there. And when I click on the cog, it reopens the pet selection, and I can choose a new pet. Let's adopt Fiverr this time. So what happened there is I selected a new pet. So this function ran, and I passed the selected pet to the shared object, and over here in my pet widget, that had, it picked up that shared .selected pet, and assigned it to the data object. We told the server that we had an update, and so over here in the update, we said, okay, well, we have a current pet already, so let's just update that glide record with the new pet. And that's what happened. All right, so I have just a little more CSS that I want to pop in this other widget, and we will show one more thing here. Let me find that. All right, let's save this. And now, when we take a look at this now, let's re-enable this preview. We'll close some of this stuff down. All right, so now when I open up the pet selection and I scroll through, look, Fiverr is selected. So you remember we did that ng class here in the pet selection. Let's look at the HTML. ng class. So we tested. So that current pet that's in the shared object, is its name equal to this pet's name? If so, apply the selected class. And what do we have over here? We have a little CSS for thumbnail.selected. In that case, we're going to apply a box shadow. So that's why Fiverr is selected. And I'll give 5 points to whoever knows where a rabbit named Fiverr comes from. Maybe put that in the comments. No, points don't mean anything, but just a little trivia. Yeah, so if I click on Fiverr, of course, nothing is really going to happen. It's not going to make any new changes in the database because we looked at this right here. So our server script is only going to run if our input was different from the selected pet. But if I select a new pet, let's adopt Delilah, and now I reopen that, I see Delilah is selected. All right, now let's actually put this in the portal. So I have these two widgets, but I only need to place one of these widgets in the portal, and that's the My Pet widget, because remember, the pet selection is embedded inside this widget. So let's go. Now, to get into this, if you don't know this already, a very easy way to get into editing your portal is to hold down the Control key on your keyboard and click on any widget on the screen. That opens up your portal menu. And I am going to choose to open this page in the designer mode. Now, be patient on this page. Sometimes this can really hang up for a little while. And you think that nothing's happening, and then you go clicking around and you might screw things up. If you're just patient, this will always eventually open. Okay, so I'm going to search for my widget that I made, My Pet. And I'm just going to drag this wherever I want it. Let's put it right here. All right, now another thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to View Pet Adoptions table, and I'm going to delete my entry just so we can demo this again from scratch, or from the beginning. All right, let's refresh. Okay, so now you see we have a button on the page. Need emotional support? Yes, I do. I've been very lonely lately. Don't worry, that's not a cry for help. Okay, I click it. It opens up a modal. Adopt a portal pet. I get to choose from all these pets. Wonderful. Let's go with Thurston this time. Adopt Thurston. And there he is. There's our pet. Now we have a much more, I don't know, how would you put it? Much more culturally relevant portal, or much more adoptable portal. I don't know, you can think of all kinds of goofy ways to say it. But anyways, we've personalized the experience, and we've done that through a very interactive widget. So we demonstrated a lot of things here. We got data from the server. We plugged that into a template. We created client functions so that when we click on our template, things happen, and then we write back to the server. So we did a lot. Let's just take a recap of everything that we did. Yeah, so what are all the cool things we did? So we talked about the data object. Anything you put in data is available to the HTML template, client script, and the server script. So that's pretty cool. We used the glide record to push glide record results to the data object. So we could build these objects of data that are very easy to use in our template then. We populated our template with server data by using ng-repeat. So remember the data.pets that we defined here, we were able to use on our template very easily. We conditionally applied a class. We informed the server script of a change in data via c.server.update, which becomes the input object in the server script then. We shared data with an embedded widget by using a shared property. We opened up a modal dialog using the SP modal service. We called the client-side function from our template and passed it information. And we got hacky with the angular.element functionality to target and manipulate a button and click it and hide it without the user having to do anything. So here's some recommended resources, a couple of things. So first of all, we have a blog out there, portalguru.cernasolutions.com, where I try to post pretty regularly on a variety of portal topics. We got some good tutorials out there. That's a good one to check out. If you're interested about that Angular element, there's the website to go read the documentation on that. The modals. There's good documentation on opening those service portal modals on GitHub. Check that out. Then there's, of course, the Bootstrap components website where you can make use of all those components. And we used ng-repeat. I have a blog article that tells you all a lot of cool things that you can do with ng-repeat. So we'll take this time now. We just have about 5 minutes left for questions. Let's see if we have any questions.
Yeah, Jeff, we do. I've got that open right now. First, we want to give a shout out to Seth from Alabama, who got the 5 points for Watership Down, being the answer to where fiber is from. One question we got from Eric is Service Portal equal to HR Service Portal or HR Service Management? How do those relate?
Yes, so it's built on the same Service Portal platform. It's just the HR portal is going to have a selection of widgets out of box that are more relevant to HR functionality. So it's essentially, so the Service Portal as a plugin is the same. There's no new features or functionality with the portal itself. But when you activate the HR portal plugin, that's just giving you a new template of pages and a new series of widgets that are made available to you. So I hope that answers your question.
Okay. Another question came in. When doing SN app dev using all the various online editing and coding tools, can you still use something like ng inspector and see your Angular objects while you're working with them?
Yeah, good question. So I assume by Angular or ng inspector you mean like a Chrome plugin. So let's take a look at this, and I'll demonstrate that really quickly. So if I target one of these widgets using the element inspector in Chrome, so here's the outlying widget container. So I have a plugin. I can't remember exactly what this is called. This might be ng inspector, but it's they're all pretty similar. And I click on it, I can see the scope of my application here. And so this data object that's the data object. So you'll see this is pretty familiar here, right? My current pet is defined here, selected pet. So you have access to all of the, the entire scope of your widget here in AngularJS properties. So that helps you get a really good understanding of what you built, and it helps you debug it. And then you'll see, if you dig in here, you'll see there's all kinds of cool stuff. If you keep going up to the parent, you'll see you have information about the current page that you're on. I think there's even a user object in here somewhere. Yeah, so go ahead and dig through this, and you'll find all kinds of really interesting things about the scope of your portal. All right, any other questions?
We have a few more that we'll try to get through before our time runs out. So when you select a different pet each time it replaced the pet you owned, how come it did not create the new entry in the pet adoption table?
Okay, that is because, where is that here? So pet selection, that's actually going to be in the My Pet widget. Let's load that up, and let's look at the server script. Okay, that's because when I let the server script know that I had a change, it's going to run the server. Basically, I'm using this to test it if there were changes. And in that, I look to see, do we currently have a pet? If so, then I'm just using the same glide record that I used up here to check for the pet to update it. So I didn't create a new record here. I'm just updating the existing glide record object with a new, I'm setting the field ID or the field value of uPet to my new pet. If I didn't have a current pet, then I create a new record. So hopefully that makes sense to you. All right, it looks like we're at the top of the hour. So yeah, we could talk about this all day long. There's a lot to talk about, but stay tuned, because we're going to have additional webinars, and I think what I would like to do is follow up on this widget that we just built today and start doing some more advanced things like build options into it and do other cool things. So thank you very much for attending. It was a pleasure to share with you, and don't hesitate to contact me with any questions. My email's at the beginning of this PowerPoint, and be sure to go check out our blog, portalguru.cernasolutions.com. So thank you, everybody, and have a wonderful day. Aloha.
All right, thanks, everyone.